speak in front of experts in the field, and I'm really privileged. I think my talk acts as a bridge to for the previous panel. Just a brief introduction of myself. I'm a relatively new postdoc at Haman's lab, and I have the privilege to be supervised by Professor Lim as well. I'm going to talk about how we can select outcome measures with regards to the FDA recommendations. Just as a summary, first we will review FDA documents and go into detail of one of them, and then we are trying to see how current research stands with regards to the FDA recommendations, and finally just very brief notes to considering further research. FDA, with regards to clinical trials in the addiction field, has published several documents. One of the first one was about alcohol use disorder, published in 2015, and then in 2020, another document for opioid use disorder, and then 2023 on stimulant use disorder. And as you can see, all of them were issued by Center for Drug Evaluations, and mainly they were concerned about to study drugs. But interestingly, recently on 11th of July, they published another document specifically about clinical consideration for studies of devices for treatment of opioid use disorder. And because during these documents, there were similar items discussed, but by time they were discussed more completely and into more details. So I'm going to focus on the last one, which is more relevant to this forum as well. So first, FDA provides some general recommendations. They were some of them were discussed by Abhishek and other lecturers in the previous panel. And yeah, they first that at the beginning of the study, even before running the study or at the step of writing the proposals, discuss the outcome measures, as Abhishek mentioned earlier, to prevent, further obstacles down the road. And yeah, we thought that it's going to be nice that at the discussion panel, people who had similar experiences with FDA shared their experiences with us. And with regards to general recommendations, they ask the studies to be at least 6 months of length of treatment. And one, I think, important factor is they mentioned that clinical outcomes should have a particular characteristic, and that is should provide valid scientific evidence of clinically significant benefits. And the FDA mentions that it means by saying that it should provide and show an improvement in how a patient and participant feels, functions, or survives. And as we can see, this is a broad definition, and it's not just mentioning one outcome only, and many outcomes can be included under this definition. So now let's go to the outcomes that recommended by FDA for devices in addiction, particularly in OUD. The first one is changing drug use pattern, changing OUD disease status, reduction in adverse outcomes, patient-reported outcomes, and other outcomes measures that can be defined by the researchers. One point highlighted by FDA, which I want to emphasize now, is they say if you are going to report change in drug use, it is better to use percentages of responders rather than comparing the group means. And by responder, they ask the researchers or sponsors to define a threshold of change in drug use that is clinically significant benefit for the patients and participants. The second category, they ask if they are studying a population with a diagnosis based on DSM. They can report change in the severity of OUD according to the DSM. And the third one is reduction in adverse outcomes of OUD. I think this is also something new to the field of neuromodulation, and we can consider it in more depth today or in future, that they recommend that studies in the neuromodulation field also include adverse and reduction in adverse clinical outcomes, such as the need for emergency interventions, hepatitis C infection or reinfection, mortality. These are just some examples. The researchers can think other examples as well. And one particular item that is has been used and we have seen in the field so far is patient-reported outcomes, particularly cravings and something like that. And then again, they ask the researchers to study and consider the magnitude and duration of change in the PRO that is also relevant to a clinically significant benefit, not just any change. Besides that, they are open to discuss and have other clinical measures and outcomes provided by the researchers. So that was just a brief consideration of the FDA recommendations. Here, very briefly, I want to use the data provided by Intom to see how and to what extent the current research stands to the FDA recommendations. As you can see, most of the TMS and TS studies use craving as a PRO or change in drug consumption as their primary outcomes. And but one thing that I mentioned earlier was change the responder percentage of responders, not just comparing the means of the groups. And in particular, for example, 11 studies use multiple session RTMS for treating AUD, but 5 out of 10 reported change in drug consumption, but none of them reported percentage of responders. So we can see this can be a change for future and next studies. And the other part, you see, we haven't studied that adverse clinical outcomes, especially in neuromodulation field. So this can be something we can consider. So FDA is flexible to add new clinical outcomes. Just as a wrap-up, they ask for 6 months of treatment duration for clinical justification of a device, and they ask for considering percentage of responders rather than changing groups, and reduction in adverse clinical outcomes can be considered more as an endpoint in future neuromodulation studies. Thank you for attention. I want to thank my supervisors, Dr. Lim and Dr. Ikhtiyari, and yeah, thanks so much.